Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, man?
It's going great. I'm Friday before the Independence Day weekend, so I'm excited to go out and grill something and spend time with the family.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's supposed to be beautiful out this weekend. So really excited. It was raining the last few days, and I think tomorrow's supposed to be 81. And then the following day is supposed to be in the mid 80s too, with sunny skies. So it'll be a perfect barbecuing weather, get out there, hang out, and really just enjoy the holiday weekend. Prior to that, we actually had a Greg Dickerson, CEO and founder of Dickerson International, here on the podcast today. And he is just overall an impressive individual. He's done so many things in his lifetime, from starting out in the military, getting into the restaurant industry and growing within that industry, and then finally getting into some general contracting for commercial construction, building subdivisions for residential housings, and then finally selling that business and then getting into real estate development full time. And as an investor, he's a coach, really, you name it, he's done it. And in today's episode, we really dove into the real estate development piece because that's something that he's really been focused on over the last decade or so. And we really gained a ton of value from this particular episode. We talked about things like what got him interested in real estate development in the first place, his first project and some of the hurdles he had to overcome in order to make sure that he performed well in that environment. And then we dove into some of the skills that are required in order to really be successful in real estate development. And he touched on a few different skill sets that I think you guys will gain value from. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this episode. It was precise, and he really did provide a ton of knowledge that you guys will gain a lot of value from. Jeff, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Just that he's a very impressive serial entrepreneur, and his resume is impressive. So I'm excited for you guys to hear it.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this episode. Hey, Greg, great to see you. How's everything going?
Wonderful. It's a happy Friday, 4th of July weekend.
Oh, yeah. I know Jeff, he's looking forward to grilling a little bit, and I'm just going to be relaxing. I actually I'm going to visit my family. I'm half Puerto Rican, and my cousin's graduating from college this coming week. And so we're going to go down there and celebrate with her and my aunt and everything. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Post-pandemic 4th of July weekend. And, I think everybody's looking forward to getting together without having to worry about everything.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah,
exactly.
And we're all big travelers, too. So, just getting out there and getting to the airport and, traveling to different places is pretty exciting. But really what we wanted to do, especially when we first talked to someone, is learn a little bit more about them. So obviously you do a lot on social media. You've got a strong presence on YouTube and various other platforms. But for those of our listeners that don't know who you are, could you kind of give us an overview of what you do and really how you got into real estate?
Yeah. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, real estate developer and investor. And then I coach and mentor people all over the world doing all kinds of different things, from, professional athletes to family offices to physicians, professionals, getting into syndication, learning how to get into development. I'm involved in some startups. I do a lot of equity capital as well. So a number of different things, but I started in the business in 1997 as a remodeling handyman contractor, built that into a $30 million building company, sold it, started 12 other companies along the way, built those up, exited, and I've been doing equity capital and real estate development ever since. And I was very fortunate. You said you lived in DC, so I was on the outer banks of North Carolina and building resort rental properties. I started working for a bunch of investors and other developers that were coming down from Northern Virginia. That's one of the number one owner demographics on the Outer Banks, buying big $1 million beach houses. So they were coming down and doing stuff, and I started working for some of them on their renovations and building houses for them, and started learning about real estate development from those individuals. So I was very fortunate to meet some very successful, sophisticated developers and investors and learn from them. And that's kind of how I learned. I didn't go to college. I went in the Navy right out of high school, learned everything the hard way, educated myself. And then I learned from very successful real estate investor and developers by working for them and with them in their projects. And that's what I continue to do now.
That's awesome. Yeah. One of my good buddies, he actually bought an investment property in the Outer Banks last year as like a Airbnb. And within a 6 or 8 month period, he was able to sell it for a significant profit. So it's kind of interesting to see. I mean, there's been an influx of people in that area. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say that.
What you're saying about just going out of high school, didn't go to college, I can definitely relate to that. I didn't go the Navy route, but I started building houses as soon as I got out, and I worked for and learned from all these experienced builders that's been building buildings for 30 to 50 years. So you get a lot for someone who has the experience. So I definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I built that company. So, like I said, I started out just doing remodeling handyman stuff. I'd never built a house, had no clue what I was doing. So as I started building my company and getting into new construction, building spec houses and doing other things, I went and hired the leaders of my company from one of the biggest developers down there at the time. They were building 60 to 80 houses a year. I hired their vice president and one of their head designers to come work with me and help me build my company. So same thing. I got people that had been in it for 20 years down there building multi-million-dollar beach houses to teach me how to do it and to build the company for me and with me. So that's how I learned.
Yeah, that's amazing. I like to hear that when someone else has done that too. It's like a street smarts thing, right? That you just gain the real knowledge, hands-on experience. So I like that a lot. So I know you got in real estate development, but what got you really interested in doing development instead of just doing other aspects of real estate?
So my first deal was a lot flip, and that's where the light bulb really went off. I was doing some building, and I had a friend of mine who was a real estate agent, and he came along and said, "Hey, there's this lot that we can buy over here for $100,000. My dad has a client that'll pay us 130 for it. I can't remember, somewhere around there like that." He said, "You put up the money, I'll do everything else." And I said, "Can you really do that?" And he's like, "Yeah." So we did. We split the 30,000. I made 15 grand in 30 days. And, to me, that was just an amazing thing. I'd never done anything like that. I'd owned houses, but I'd never done anything, with real estate as an investment or as, a business. And then the light bulb went off, said, wait a minute, I'm building, people are coming down here looking for property. So I need to develop property so that I can sell lots to people and then build them the house. So that's what I started doing. I started creating opportunities by buying lots, flipping them to my investors, then building them houses, or I'd tear something down to create lots. I did a lot of oceanfront, and the way you had to get those was to either tear something down like a hotel that had multiple lots under it, or you had to tear a house down and redevelop. So I kind of got into it that way. And then my first development project, like real development project, from a land development standpoint, came from my engineer at the time, civil engineer. He had a client that didn't pay him. And he said, "Hey, he gave me this project in exchange for the fees. Do you want it?" And I said, "Sure." So I came in, I bought it from him, and, we went forward and developed it. So that was my first, residential land subdivision. And then I started doing some commercial buildings and things like that. A lot of it was, started out for a fee. And then I realized, well, shoot, the guys that are making all the money in this business are developers. That's who's coming down here hiring me to do the project. So I would just ask these guys, I'm like, "Look, where did you make all your money?" And they're like, "We started out like you, building some strip centers, this, that, and the other. But then ultimately, we hire people like you now and manage the process. And our job is to find the deals, create the value, bring the financing, and lead the team to the finish line." So it's just bigger dollars, less headaches, and different business models. So I evolved my business into the development side, which, is the company that hired individuals like me at the time. So it was just an evolution of the process and economies of scale.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no. And that kind of leads us into the next question that I'd love you to talk about. So making that transition from, the GC, someone who's on the ground, actually developing everything on the ground, to now being, the developer where you hire the GCs and everything else. Can you talk to us about that first experience and what made you take the jump? Because that's a mindset shift in and of itself as well.
Yeah, once I reached the point to where the business was worth, a multiple of the income, I decided to sell it. And that's when I transitioned into becoming a developer and hiring general contractors to work for me. Because then, I didn't have to take the risk. I didn't have the overhead. I didn't have the headaches of running a company, all those types of things. So it was really when I exited that business, 04, 05, when I transitioned into the development side, because I was still doing some building, some spec development, was still building some buildings and things. And it was just easier and more efficient to just hire a general contractor to do it for me, especially post 2009 when, the market changed and all the builders were hungry and everybody was looking for work. Just didn't make any sense to self-perform. And then the bigger the projects are, the bigger the risk is in being the general contractor and the developer. So, I just didn't want to self-perform anymore. It didn't make any sense when I could hire that out and do multiple projects and not, take the risk as the general contractor.
Sure. So that first project that you did after making that transition, what was it? And could you kind of walk us through some of the obstacles that you faced?
It was spec development. So I was building a bunch of spec houses. So instead of me, as the general contractor managing everything, being responsible for, warranties, callbacks, materials, slippage, things like that, I just started hiring general contractors to build for me. So that was really the transition where the light bulb went off of how easy it was and how much more I could do with, less time, energy, and effort. And really for me, I'm an efficiency expert. So what I look for is efficiencies in any business, any investment, any system. And my whole goal is to make the most amount of money with the least amount of time, energy, and effort invested possible. And that was just the way to do it, because then I could do any kind of project and I would hire the builders that were experts at the different things. So if it was an office building, I'd hire somebody, that's what they do. If it was a multifamily building, you want a contractor that's all they do. If it's medical, same thing, so that's kind of how that business model evolved over time. And, there really weren't any like roadblocks or anything like that. It was just, realizing and understanding that I can do more and I can scale faster, that way through outsourcing, which is really what it is, versus trying to, self-perform and do all that myself. Now I could have kept that company and set it aside and it ran itself and all that, but it's a distraction. There comes a point in the evolution of your business where certain business models become more of a distraction than anything else, because you only have so much time, energy, and effort in every day to focus on something. So my focus is better spent finding deals, understanding what the highest and best value is, creating that value, bringing the resources to the table to get that done, then move on to the next one.
And I think that's super important what you just shared there, because that's a mindset shift. And, I'm still relatively new in my investing career. I have a fourplex. And I remember when I first started with the fourplex, I was pretty much trying to do a lot of the stuff myself. And that's typical with a lot of investors, is they have this mindset where it's like, well, I could save money by doing this, or save money by doing that. And what they realize is that your time is the most precious resource on this planet. And so if you can maximize your time in other venues that can actually maximize those returns, it's going to be much better suited doing so. And that's the mindset shift right there. And obviously you were in the business for quite some time prior to, taking on the developer role. And obviously you were able to do much more on that front as a result of making that shift. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I've always been about scale and leading, delegating, motivating, leveraging resources and talents of others. And I learned that early on. So the real evolution was in my first building company. And I, even though I didn't go to college and all that, I was in the Navy. So I understood leadership principles. I was a leader in the military. And then when I got out, I did restaurants and construction. I was a leader, manager in restaurants. So I learned systems. I learned, how to lead, delegate, motivate, and then I poured into myself through leadership management books, business books, motivational self-development stuff. So I understood and got very quickly and clearly that, I can only do so much myself, number one. Number two, I knew what my limitations were. I focused on my strengths and then hired out and outsourced my weaknesses. So, that's really the key. And again, when I started in the business, I didn't know how to frame a house. I didn't know how to build anything. I learned by hiring professionals, learning from them, letting them do the job, coaching them to success, and putting the right people in the right seats. So it's all about that leading, delegating, motivating, and then understanding what it is you want to do. And my whole mindset was, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well go as big as I can go. And you can only go so big if you're doing everything yourself.
Completely agree with that. You definitely have to delegate to stuff that not necessarily your strengths, right? So if you do that, you can focus more on other things. And that being said, for those of us, the viewers and listeners that are interested in getting into real estate development, what would you say are some of the most important skills that they should be developing or inquiring as a team to get into the development?
So one is to know the market. You really, there's just no shortcut there. You have to know the market. You have to know what the opportunities are, how to identify, the highest and best use for the market that you're in. Number two is understanding the financials. Without the money, there's no deal. So you have to know how to raise capital. You have to know how to get funding. You have to know how to reverse engineer the economics of the deal. So you have to establish what's the value that I'm trying to create, and how does that equate into the economics of the deal to make sure the deal even works. So you have to know how to do the economic feasibility. And then understanding the regulatory environment. What are all the things that I need to understand in terms of approvals? Because a lot of people will say, well, this property is zoned for 100 units. Well, just because it's zoned for something doesn't mean you can actually do it and put it on there. And there's a lot of different, considerations that need to be taken in when you're looking at, the feasibility of a project from the standpoint of logistics, utilities, access, lot coverage, capacities, things like that. So you have to become an expert in zoning. You don't need to be a technical expert in terms of how it's built, how it's developed, how it's done. But, one of the areas that I recommend everybody study is their zoning code, so that you understand what the uses are, what they mean, how to figure out density, capacity, things like that. So when you talk to the zoning departments and zoning professionals at the cities and counties and municipalities that you're working in, they can't just blindly tell you something. And the biggest thing I always tell everybody is question everything. So if somebody says from a municipal or a regulatory standpoint, you can only do this because of the rules, the first thing I say is, well, where is that rule? So that I can read it, understand it, and interpret it. Because a lot of times you have a box checker. They're just sitting there saying, well, this says this, so I'm checking that box. Whereas, well, it may say this, but only if this, and this are true. And if this, and this are met, well, then this changes. So I always tell people, study the zoning code, understand what it says, question things that don't make any sense, and, do your own homework and due diligence, and don't just accept, any answer from anybody when you're looking at a project, trying to understand the feasibility, the capacity, what you can do with a piece of property. Because a lot of individuals within departments of regulatory agencies will tell you what they want you to hear, not necessarily what it is that you can actually do.
And you kind of mentioned, the economics of a deal. And I think one of the main questions that I get from people is, how do you project out what a potential construction cost is, especially now with everything construction costs are fluctuating pretty wildly at this point. And obviously it'll start to stabilize over time. But do you have any advice for individuals who are, going through the process of maybe doing their first commercial development? They're trying to project out what the potential construction cost is, so they can back out and try to, project what the returns would be for, their investors.
Yeah. So, knowing your market. So number one, know whatever it is you're looking to do, what the economics of that deal is going to be. What kind of money is it going to bring in? What's your revenue? So you reverse engineer back from there in order to, make sure that the project is financially feasible, economically feasible. So from a construction standpoint, you just talk to a general contractor. So if it's site work, you want to talk to some site work contractors and, try to get a rough cost of what they're seeing in the marketplace currently, and, what those costs look like and what they're averaging on the projects that they're in. Of course, that's all going to be relative depending on your site conditions, requirements, things like that. But they can give you an average, asphalt so much a mile, curb and gutter is so much, a foot or whatever they're charging at the time. So you can kind of get a rough idea of what those costs are going to be. And then when it comes to actual vertical of a building, then you talk to general contractors that are building the type of project you want to build, and you get estimates from them in terms of what they're seeing, right now. If it's a 100-unit multifamily building, you want to talk to a builder that's building 100-unit multifamily buildings, the type of construction, garden style or high rise, whatever it is you're looking at. And they can tell you what their costs are averaging right now. Of course, they can't give you a hard number until you have complete plan specs, finishes and all that. Same thing with houses. You want to talk to a builder that's building the kind of product that you want to deliver. You don't want to talk to $1 million builder, and if you're looking to build $200,000 houses, and vice versa. So you find the pros who are doing what it is you want to do. They can tell you what they're seeing right now, but they can't guarantee what anything's going to be in the future, because costs are, they're up and down.
Absolutely. I mean, you're exactly right. I deal with that daily as a commercial GC. When I go down there, I have questions. A lot of those people, they're looking over their shoulders to the most experienced person in a room to help answer the question. So yeah, the checking the box thing, I definitely agree with it. A lot of times you definitely need to do your due diligence before you walk in. So on a question that we normally typically ask is, what is like the most impactful book that you've read that may have changed your life or led you in a different direction? I know you said that you did a lot of leadership books and such. So I was just curious what would be one that really stands out for you.
Yeah, yeah. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it was Rich Dad Poor Dad. So that was the first, real book that I read on entrepreneurship, understanding, the different quadrants that he points out in there, from, employee to employer to business owner to investor. And it's really interesting. Yeah, I'm assuming you guys have read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what did you get out of that book from like a main takeaway in terms of an investment vehicle?
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway I took is that, you're kind of fed, not necessarily, I mean, it's kind of a lie your whole life, where it's like you go get an education and you're able to, provide for your family and really live the American dream. Whereas that's becoming increasingly unlikely, given, all the things that are happening in this world. And not only that, but it doesn't take you too long to reach a financial freedom if you take the steps towards actually acquiring those income producing assets over time. And so I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background personally. I always had an entrepreneurial itch, but my family wasn't really natural entrepreneurs. And so, I kind of had to figure out the hard way that that's something that I was really interested in. And I think that book kind of helped validate the mindset that I had, that said, okay, well, I'm not crazy. I'm not a person who, is molded for this particular, go get an education and then finally, get the high paying job or whatever that is necessary, quote unquote, given that ideology. So,
Well, I guess what I mean specifically is, like, most people read that book and get real estate, right? They say, okay, I want to go invest in real estate because Robert Kiyosaki talks about that, buying real estate and, going from his first, what was it, 12, 24 unit, whatever it was, and scaling from there. And a lot of people get, Robert Kiyosaki out of that book. I want to be Robert Kiyosaki and what do he did. What I got out of the book was I wanted to be Rich Dad. So when I read that book, everybody went to Rich Dad. He had all the businesses. He was teaching everybody. He had all the real estate. Everybody was learning from him. The whole book was about Rich Dad. So that's like, I want to be him. So what I got from the book was build businesses that generate cash flow to invest in other assets. Because at the time I read the book, I had no money. I had no backers. I had no formal education. I had nobody in my family were entrepreneurs. And here I was setting out on my entrepreneurial journey. So I wanted to own real estate and I wanted to get into that. So how was I going to do that? So I had to go build businesses to generate the cash flow to reinvest. And that's kind of what I did my whole career. And then it all scaled. And like you'd asked about that transition, basically what happens is in the area I was in, I maxed out my current business model. So I had to evolve in order to broaden my ability to do projects, in different geographical locations. So, if you're going to be a builder on the Outer Banks, I mean, there's only so many houses you can build because the market's only so big and you're not going to get all of it. It doesn't matter how good you are or whatever, you're only going to get so much market share. So I maxed that out and I was like, well, shoot, I don't want to just do this. This is, I want to do more. So if I want to do a project in DC, I couldn't go set up a company and do that. I needed to develop and, lead, delegate, motivate, outsource, things like that. So that's kind of how my mindset worked when I read that book. That was the most pivotal book from an entrepreneurial standpoint. From a managerial standpoint, how to lead, delegate, motivate, manage people, recruit, hire, train, the 1 Minute Manager series of books. That's the system that I learned in the restaurant industry. And that's the system that I used in all my businesses, and everybody in my businesses. I all had them, read those books and we talked about it and we used that management philosophy in all of our companies. So those were probably the two biggest impacts and influences on my life in terms of, business models, management systems, and entrepreneurship.
that's awesome. Yeah, I actually have not read the 1 Minute Manager, so that's definitely something I'm going to add to the reading list. I've read some.
There's three books in the series. The 1 Minute Manager, it's the new 1 Minute Manager. That's the updated version. Then there's Putting the 1 Minute Manager to Work. That's the second book. And then Leadership in the 1 Minute Manager. That's the third book. So you want to read them in that order because they all build on the one before it. And it's a whole system of leading, delegating, motivating, understanding that people are your most valuable resource in any business, getting results out of people by helping them feel good about themselves and the contribution they're making to the organization, the community, and the world at large. In a sincere way, not a manipulative way. So it's a whole system in terms of how to do that. And it's all about recruiting, hiring, training, aces in places, the right people in the right seats, setting goals, holding the behavior accountable to those goals, tracking results, those types of things. So it's pretty in-depth, but each book is short and pretty much to the point. And then the key is implementing. So a lot of people go, they're their entire lives, their careers and different companies, bringing in the next management system or theory and looking for the next thing. And really, you got to take the one and apply it and continue to use it and stick to it. And, pretty much everything out there, whether it's traction, EOS, whatever, it's all built off the 1 Minute Manager principles.
Yeah. For those guys who are listening, it's definitely worth a read. And like I said, I'll be purchasing those books as well and trying to dive into some of the insights that they have for the books. That's awesome. So
Absolutely.
First off, we just want to thank you so much, Greg, for stopping by. If people want to learn more about you or, be able to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do so?
GregDickerson.com. That's where all my information is. I have a YouTube channel, podcast where I put out content every day, just, all about entrepreneurship, real estate, investing, the economy, all kinds of different things.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Greg. Really appreciate that. For those of you guys who are listening, please drop 5-star review if you're listening to it on any podcast medium like Apple Podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. We provide awesome content every week. So thanks again for stopping by, and we'll see you guys next time.